Many have been wondering for a long time what is happening in this world. Wars, diseases, propaganda from all sides. First, we talked about global warming. Then the terminology was subtly changed to climate change. An attempt is made to explain the difference between climate and weather, especially since the word warming no longer convinces anyone. Newspeak forces us to learn and understand new words almost every day. Certain personalities are demonized or exalted as if we were in a competition or a game. Some behave like fans, others like hooligans. Ideologies, worldviews, generations, and above all, the vanities of certain persons clash without filters. Today, many people call themselves analysts of geopolitics, geoeconomics, military strategists, and disease healers and try their hand at enlightenment. Believe me, each of these speakers has his own reasons. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. After all, I do the same thing. The news arrives thick and fast every day. Most of them are worrying. In a hectic daily routine, the recipient of the information doesn't even know what it is actually about. If you try to understand, you realize that some contradictions occur in the same sentence. You say everything and the opposite of everything in the same breath. The Russians and the Chinese are evil, but they sit in the same organizations as the Americans and Europeans. Confusing peoples is deliberate and systematic. I'm lucky to have time to get to the bottom of everything that interests me. I have had the honor of working in over 60 countries, knowing, learning, respecting, and loving other cultures. But above all, I pride myself on speaking 6 languages and being able to move and inform myself all over the world. In addition, passion, training, and life experience give me the opportunity to analyze everything systematically from different perspectives. I also admit that I have a big inferiority complex, which is that the Italian language is only in fifth place in my linguistic baggage in terms of quality. However, it is important that I report not only on the things I have studied and researched, but on many things that I have experienced firsthand. There are 2 pieces of good news. One, there will be no nuclear and destructive world war, and second, if there were one, no one would notice. We recently saw the televised duel on CNN between Biden and Trump, namely the decadence of the West in real time. In parallel, there are elections almost everywhere in this year 2024. The voter who throws his ballot paper into the ballot box, mainly with the hope that the world can be changed for the better. If elections changed anything in the system, they would have been banned long ago. Bertolt Brecht, German essayist. Every day we receive information from politicians who often discuss issues that usually affect citizens only marginally in their daily lives. There is a lot of talk, but almost nothing is said. It is also very interesting to observe how clowns, such as Javier Milei in Argentina with slogans, throwing macroeconomic figures at random, and all this through TikTok, become president of state. I will investigate where the best universities are for the faculty of hypocrisy. I have 3 questions. 1. What is wrong with this world? Second, is politics really as powerful as it is portrayed to us? Third, could it not be that other powers are above politics and politicians? To answer these 3 questions, I studied and analyzed a series of historical quotes from intellectuals, thinkers, politicians, economists, scientists, philosophers, even athletes and artists. I'm also talking about well-known Nobel laureates in a wide variety of disciplines. It is precisely these quotes that tell us that neither politicians nor statesmen rule the world. I argue that these quotes should be analyzed from the most elementary schools through high school and learned from them, instead of evaluating them as conspiracy theories. Meanwhile, we also know what the difference is between a conspiracy theory and reality. Once it was 20 years, today it is 1 year. The answer to the first question. The anarchist kleptocorporatocracy, since we are on the subject of Newspeak. At the moment, there is no conflict between the golden billion and the remaining 7 billion people, between BRICS and G7, between Putin and Biden, or between the global south and the industrialized countries. At the level of what is shown and reported to us, differences of opinion on the worldview clash more aggressively. The so-called West still has the feeling that it wants to impose its values on the rest of the world and finds that the other side is much stronger to react. Under the direction of China and Russia, There are many other states that have noticed that the hegemons are not as powerful as everyone believed. A vacuum has formed on the world stage simply because the Anglo-Saxon sphere is losing its hegemony and a new movement of power is emerging. I am sorry to have to say this so clearly, but the current conflicts that we read, hear about, and see terrible images every day are planned operations and, unfortunately, with collateral damage, quoting a certain Madeleine Albright. The elite increasingly sees the danger of losing power because they have been wrong to speculate over the past 30 years. In 2007 and 2008, the elite realized that their system had reached its limits. He has staked everything on the purely financial economy. The exclusive dependence on finance, especially in the West, which has mathematically led the monetary system to a dead end, has led the elite in recent years to accumulate capital without added value. This capital has been created out of thin air by central banks since the banking and financial crisis, and then the pandemic crisis, and currently during wars. Even more serious is the fact that this capital has been given to the speculative financial world instead of being invested in the real economy. A good example was during the pandemic, when no one in Europe was able to produce masks. To block this change and protect themselves, this small elite has drawn up an agenda called the 2030 Agenda. At most, we could speak of a fierce competition between large private multinational groups to secure the free resources left on this planet. There are also powerful sovereign wealth funds, such as Norway's National Sovereign Wealth Fund, the China Investment Corporation, or Singapore's Temasek Holdings, which hold significant holdings in many large multinational groups through public-private partnerships. Public-private partnerships are a form of cooperation between public and private authorities with the aim of financing, building, and managing infrastructure or providing services of interest. The global economic interdependence of all these powerful players makes a destructive nuclear war highly unlikely. To support this thesis, I randomly searched for regional economic interdependencies. These are the results after 10 minutes of searching. Take the example of BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager. This giant achieves 66% of its turnover in the Americas, North and South America, 29% in Europe, and 5% in Asia. Out of curiosity, I went to our government's website to see which Italian companies are present in Russia. Among the many, I chose only the suspicious ones. Augusta Westland is cooperating with Russian Helicopters, a subsidiary of the state-owned company Oberonprom, which already markets the AW-139 civil helicopter in the Russian Federation and the CS. Alenia Aermachi cooperates with the Russian Sukhoi Group for the production of the Superjet 100 regional aircraft, which began commercial flights in spring 2011. The Finmeccanica Group is consolidating its collaboration with Russian companies in the aerospace, defense, and telecommunications sectors. The Finmeccanica Telespazio Group company is engaged in a series of activities being defined and implemented with the Institute of Russian Railways (NIAS). Statistics show that there are currently 5,200 German companies in China, and on the other side, there are 2,500 Chinese companies in Germany. It should therefore be clear to everyone that economic interests are far more important than what we are sold as political conflicts. On a political level, an entertainment game is taking place. The famous American singer Frank Zappa said that politics is the entertainment department of the economy. To answer the first question again, what is happening on this planet? A war is underway between a small and powerful elite and the rest of humanity. What is the 2030 Agenda? The 2030 Agenda was proclaimed at the 2015 United Nations Summit in New York. It is a global future contract to which national governments must submit. This agenda includes 17 so-called sustainability goals that only seem good at first glance. If you look at them more closely, you always get to the same actors who want nothing less than full control over the resources of our Earth. A single central world government, and therefore the enslavement of all peoples. In order to exert influence in all areas of human life, these goals are not only driven by the United Nations itself, but also by influential partners such as the World Economic Forum and its Great Reset. For more than 50 years, the WF has connected the most influential people from politics, business, science, media, trade unions, NGOs, culture, and churches and brought them together with the world's wealthiest people. In addition, for over 30 years, he has been training the world's corporate and political elite. Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Angela Merkel, Emmanuel Macron, Justin Trudeau, Viktor Orban, or Vladimir Putin. They all attended WF school as young global leaders. No wonder, then, that the forum's founder, German professor Klaus Schwab, is considered one of the most influential personalities of our time. On June 29th, the Wall Street Journal published a front-page article making serious allegations against Klaus Schwab, the founder and president of the World Economic Forum. Since then, the report has been picked up by almost all mainstream media and then disseminated in the most remote corners of the world. Many alternative media interpret this as a blow to the WF. Some even see the end of the organization approaching. Let's look at the topic in a sober way and in its historical context. The WF is one of the most important tools in the hands of those who currently rule the world. Whether they are presidents or prime ministers of major industrialized nations, boards of directors of international organizations, governors of central banks, or heads of industry, most of them are closely associated with the WF. More than 120 international companies with billions in turnover are among the WF's strategic partners and are willing to pay a lot of money for membership. In just over half a century, Klaus Schwab has managed to build a network of powerful people that is second to none. But why would these powerful people want to destroy the WF? Let's take a look at the timeline of events surrounding the Wall Street Journal's release. The article, which accuses Schwab of various sexist and racist behavior, was published on June 29, 2024, and was based on the testimony of about 80 former employees, some of whom are still in his service. So the article was prepared well in advance. As the Wall Street Journal writes, during these preparations, he approached Schwab in May 2024 and asked for comment on the requested charges, but received no response. But in May, something else happened. Klaus Schwab announced on May 18, 2024, quite surprisingly, that he would step down in January 2025. Since Schwab led the WF alone for years and did almost nothing to build a successor, it can be assumed that there was a good reason for his decision. So it's entirely possible that he calmed things down and wanted to signal to the Wall Street Journal reporters with this gesture like, "Please calm down." The fact that this did not happen and that the Wall Street Journal published the article anyway could be due to the following reason. During the last week of June 2024, the so-called Summer Davos took place in Dalian, China. A WF event with 1,600 attendees, including prominent businessmen and politicians from around the world, including Chinese Premier Liang. Klaus Schwab appeared in person at this event, had a panel discussion with the Vietnamese Prime Minister, among other things, but did not say a word about his resignation or even a successor. It's entirely possible that he angered the people behind the Wall Street Journal. So, let's take a look at who these people are. The Wall Street Journal is owned by Rupert Murdoch News Corp Media, one of the largest and most influential media conglomerates in the world. But who are the main shareholders of News Corp Media? Well, BlackRock holds just over 7%. BlackRock's largest shareholder, Vanguard, owns just under 15% of News Corp Media. State Street and T. Rowe Price together hold over 24%. It is important to note that the main shareholders of State Street and T. Rowe Price are BlackRock and Vanguard. In other words, BlackRock has influence over more than 40% of News Corp Media's total stock volume. What does this mean now? BlackRock's founder and CEO, Larry Fink, in particular, had to know about it, and not only did he not prevent its publication, but obviously encouraged it. Again, it is important to know that Fink has been a member of the WF board since 2019. So we are obviously dealing with a power struggle within the WF. Why? Let's go back to Klaus Schwab. In 2020, he published the book, The Great Reset, which caused a stir and brought the WF to the center of attention of the international public, thus exposing it to fierce criticism around the world. After 50 years, in which the WF rose to power more and more, Largely unnoticed by most people, it has since been publicly pilloried. Someone like Larry Fink, who likes to pull the strings behind the scenes, can't like it. How could the image of the WF be changed in its own way? Modernize? Quite simply, replace Klaus Schwab, preferably with a figure little known to the public or who enjoys a good reputation in public. But the stubborn Klaus Schwab obviously wants to stay in the middle. But there is a second reason that may have led to the personal attack. Since 2016, the global climate agenda has been championed by none other than Larry Fink. In the last 6 months, however, BlackRock has drastically reduced its participation in so-called climate or ESG funds and has been in the process of saying goodbye to this agenda for about 6 months. Most likely because many people no longer believe in it and resist it. Schwab, on the other hand, is inextricably linked to this agenda and has become a global pioneer in climate protection and sustainability through his position in the WF. Another good reason for BlackRock to remove him from his post. What does this conflict mean? Certainly not the end of the WF. Almost certainly the end of Klaus Schwab's career. But what does this mean for the rest of the world? The differences within the powerful are obviously intensifying and breaking down, and they have not the slightest inhibition to make those who have served them submissive for half a century fall in cold blood. But it also means that we should all expect that they will work even harder in the coming period than before, because one thing is certain. Those at the top of the current pyramid will certainly not give up their power. The United Nations 2030 Agenda is a 17-point program for world domination and the enslavement of all peoples. Today, we will not have time to address the points of the 2030 Agenda in detail. We need a separate episode for this. Now I would like to enter into the role of politics or politicians, which is also the answer to the second question. The crisis of legitimacy of democracy. The disenfranchisement in parliamentary democracy is progressing. Many no longer see any possibility of getting involved in political events. This leads to silence. Democracy is in crisis. The representative democracies that prevail in most countries governed by the rule of law have caused citizens to turn away from politics. One wonders if democracy has become a demosclerosis. Voter turnout continues to decline, both in Europe and the United States. Joe Biden, Donald Trump, previously Barack Obama, and previously George W. Bush were elected by only a quarter of the U.S. electorate. Half did not vote. Is it only a phase of weakness of democracies? In representative democracies, decisions are no longer made in plenary after passionate debates. These are done in advance in a very opaque way, even for the citizen concerned, in the pre-parliamentary space. Citizens play a passive role in today's democracy. Politicians are not interested in the real participation of citizens, but only in voter turnout. The electoral cross is decisive. Parliamentary democracy is thus reduced to holding elections, and political participation is exhausted in it. The markets will teach Italians to vote correctly. With this sentence, the German Budget Commissioner Gunther Oettinger had trampled on the political, financial, and institutional crisis in Italy, not to mention the lack of respect for democratic thought. Politics, or rather theatrical crazy, politics takes care of the interests of entrepreneurs. He takes over their program, show business and marketing in politics. Perfect presentation is key. As a result, the statements of politicians appear fluid, meaningless, refined. Politicians seem to be product sellers who market their programs using manipulative techniques. Politics today is highly personalized. As in advertising, the language of politicians must evoke images and not encourage critical and independent thinking. As a rule, politicians are surrounded by consultants and lobbyists who represent the interests of the business community by which they are paid. Economically complex relationships are discussed with bankers, which logically leads to resolutions and decrees in the interest of the banks. The ministers of health make use of the advice of the pharmaceutical lobby, the ministers of energy, oil, gas, and so on. Disenchantment with democracy, but not only is trust in politicians declining among the population, but so is trust in democracy. Democracy in capitalist countries is perceived by many as socially unjust, and people are also dissatisfied with their personal situation. The political elites are rejected. This means that there is a disenchantment with democracy. Let's also take lobbying. Lobbying makes citizens suspicious. They know how to use or block information in a targeted manner. As the media increasingly turn to PR specialists, they organize campaigns and produce images to gain the frame. For their campaigns, they rely on important personalities from the world of entertainment, sport, and culture. Lobbying often gives the impression of secret power, taking place outside the public eye. As a rule, lobbying takes place mainly in the first three stages of the political process. First, you define the problem, put the topic on the political agenda, and finally formulate a political program. The third point is the most intense in lobbying. For example, a car manufacturer that wants its new technology to be made mandatory in the highway code must first make the project a problem and convince politicians to act as legislators. In the third stage, lobbyists then try to influence the bill for a bill. Lobbyists must work quietly and as soon as possible. Therefore, they constantly strive to come into close contact with the speakers. But there are also lobbyists who sit in parliament and are on the payroll of the economy. Lobbyist tools are the collection, processing, and dissemination of information, maintaining contacts, and forming alliances. Lobbyists follow political processes and analyze them. For example, the pharmaceutical industry exerts pressure in the health sector, influences the new approval of medicines. It also tries to influence doctors in their prescribing behavior. Politicians like to become lobbyists after their term is over. They know how to act in this business. Lobbying is a power devoid of legitimacy, a power that shuns the public, which deliberately acts in a non-transparent way. Corruption. Corruption is a gray area. It is a serious global problem. Corruption exists in all sectors of the economy. However, the arms industry is the biggest producer of corruption. There are in particular risks of corruption in legislation due to the incompetence of politicians. In a world where material prosperity has become the meaning of life and there is no longer an understandable connection between work and income, corruption is omnipresent. Corruption scandals are often uncovered by the media. Think of the corruption scandals in the early 90s, clean hands, in Italy, around the Partito Popular in Spain, the scandals around Nicolas Sarkozy and also Silvio Berlusconi. Corruption is also indispensable in sport. Just think of the FIFA corruption scandals surrounding the organization of the 2006 World Cup in Germany and in November 2022 in Qatar, and their consequences in the European Parliament. One often gets the impression that politicians exploit the state as a self-service store. They set up slush funds for party financing. Politicians ensure their sinecures even beyond political life. Schroeder immediately migrated to Gazprom, Barroso to Goldman Sachs, and even as politicians, they make sure that they are well, that they increase their diet, that they have many lucrative side jobs, which of course are not taken into account. The private telephone correspondence between the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and the CEO of the pharmaceutical giant Pfizer, Albert Bourla, in relation to the contract negotiations for the purchase of billions of vaccines for the EU area during the COVID epidemic has not yet been clarified. Not only the securing of the sinecures, but also the struggle for power and the vanity of politicians annoys many people. The profession of politician has a bad reputation. I close my speech by quoting Albrecht Müller, a German economist and publicist, who was head of planning at the Federal Chancellery during the government of Willy Brandt. We are in the hands of madmen, or irresponsible cynics, or both. I lean towards both, but the balance leans more on the side of the crazy. The truly powerful people of this world are rational. In the end, I believe that as long as a mad would-be mighty, who still hopes to build his third temple in Jerusalem, is stopped soon, the globe will continue to revolve itself and around the sun.